Tonight you're about to hear 5 true horror stories. Different people, different places, but every story ends the same way, with someone realizing they were never alone. A security guard hears his own voice in an empty mall. A child watches the streetlights shut off, one by one. A priest's house where something learns how to walk. Bodies that appear on a road then vanish. Here's the problem. One of these stories isn't a haunting. It's a warning. The twist isn't at the end. It's hidden in the middle. And once you hear it, you won't want to be alone tonight. This happened to my friend close to Halloween. I'm a security guard stationed at a gigantic shopping mall with a few other security guards. I went off to my area while the others went to theirs. I started to do my rounds, going into shops and around the main part of the mall. It was getting close to Halloween and the mall was packed. Then that's when I noticed him, the cloaked figure coming towards me, smoothly. It bumped into me as it passed me, and I felt a feeling us security. Guards never feel fear and evil. I made a call out to it to see if it would respond. "Hey, you stop right there," I yelled. It didn't acknowledge that I was there, so I followed it to see where it was going. It stopped and turned slightly to see if it was being followed. Then it continued going, but the pursuit was cut short by an elderly Asian man falling down in a shop. As the nice guy I am, I helped him up. I turned back to where the cloaked figure was, but it wasn't there. It vanished into thin air. I went to have my break, and when I was about to walk through the door, I ran into Rex, my friend. "Hey, didn't you happen to see a cloaked figure walking around?" I said. Rex went white and then said, "Yes, and this time it was looking at me." We both sat down and never brought up the cloaked figure again. We don't know if it's a person in a costume or a member of an unknown cult. So I ate my lunch and headed back out. As the afternoon turned to night, the people started to thin out and the shops started to close. When it was dead as a doornail, my night shift began. I hopped on my cart, fired up the belt driver, and started doing my rounds on the bottom floor. It was pitch black, and only the spotlight on the cart lights up one bit. The darkness isn't the only thing I should be worrying about. That cloaked figure is probably still in the mall with me. Then I heard a sound. It sounded like a child laughing. It went off in several places around me, like it was taunting me, like what little kids do to adults. But the mall is closed, meaning there's no one here. "Who's there?" I yelled. The laughing stopped and the mall fell silent again. Then suddenly there was a loud bang from the second floor that scared me. So I headed to the escalator and went up to the second floor. As I rounded the corner, I noticed the vending machine was lying down, and I noticed some big black mass next to it. I shone my light on it and noticed it was the rear end of a grizzly bear, a really gigantic grizzly bear, bigger than any I have seen. The thing froze as the light hit it, and it slowly turned to face me. The front half of the gigantic creature was that of a bobcat with glowing red eyes and long fangs. The creature rose up on its hind legs, making it about 7 to 8 feet tall. It held its bobcat paws out to balance its body. I could feel its red eyes looking right into my soul. "Who's there?" it said in a distorted version of my voice before letting out a god-awful screech. I was done. I jumped into the cart and sped all the way to the entrance of the shop and ran outside. I'm still at the same mall, and I have never seen it since that incident. They say that kids are more prone to the supernatural realm. I'm not sure if I truly believe that. However, this is a true story about recurring nightmares I had as a child. I would always have these bizarre dreams where something demonic would talk to me, through flames in my attic or a deep darkness within my home. It was always the same, evil, malicious voice, threatening me, my family, or speaking in a language I didn't understand. This particular nightmare I'm about to share has stuck with me throughout my entire life. Get comfortable, because it is a bit long. I was outside my house at night, which was unusual since I lived by the rule. When the street lights come on, it's time to come in or you will be grounded. I could see inside my house through the window. The lights were on and my family was sitting down for dinner. I watched them, confused as to why they didn't seem to notice or care about my absence. I started banging on the window to get their attention, to no avail. My friends at the time all lived a house or two away from my own. Suddenly there was a swing set in the driveway. My best friend Kyle was swinging on it. I felt instantaneous relief because I was no longer alone, but I also knew that something wasn't right. I went over to him and sat on the swing set. He wasn't talking, nor did he even seem to notice my presence beside him. I kept trying to get his attention when I remembered the candy I had stashed in my backyard. Surely that would pull him out of his strange trance, I thought. I told him to please wait for me to go grab a surprise I'd saved for us. After getting no response, I ran to the place I really did have Starburst hidden from my parents. I grabbed it and starting running back, hoping he didn't leave me out there alone. I stopped abruptly to see a vacant swing, still swaying back and forth. I was frozen with fear. He was gone. All the houses looked dark and locked up tight. I was facing the street as I watched in horror. Each set of street lights went black, one set at a time, coming toward me, that familiar darkness which I already knew healed. Something evil within it. I ran back to my front door, repeatedly ringing the doorbell to my house as I watched the darkness closing in. I knew this would be the time it finally consumed me. I felt tricked and terrified. There was nothing I could do, as it was coming right for me. The last thing I remember is closing my eyes before the last of the lights went black, accompanied by the sound of demonic laughter. Maybe it did find its way in that day. I never had another nightmare like it. Ever since then, I've always been drawn to dark things and occasionally get blindsided with debilitating depression. I know this was a dream, but that doesn't make it any less real or true. This is a real paranormal story from Finland. So here it starts. I'm now 27 years old and I was living with my family in a priest house because my mother isn't priest. It was I, my mother, father, and two brothers, and sometimes my grandma visited us. This paranormal terror happened during a span of 7 years. It was a very old house, oldest part 200 years. In the beginning, when we moved in, it was almost like any other normal priest house, but then all the paranormal nightmarish hell started one day first. Phenomena was when my brother was home and an old Chinese plate was taken down. From the wall, my brother was alone with one friend that day and asked his friend, or told, that, hey, don't play with our old antics. But my brother's friend insisted that it wasn't him. Strange, thought my brother. Then, after that, all was normal for some months. Then later, I and all family members woke up. Many nights to that something is heavily walking down the stairs from second floor and always stopped at second door on first floor. At this point, we all knew there was something strange going on in this house. These strange phenomena only got worse the longer we lived there. One night when I was walking to toilet, I noticed our table and chairs was replaced on each other like an pyramid. When I told my parents about it, they noticed it and all was pale and scared. By this point, my father got very angry and said to the rest of the family to stay behind him, that there is probably poltergeist that wanted us to move out. He did check every floor and room, but it was empty, only us. After this event, things went to the worst direction. Days after that, I was again walking to toilet during night, and this time I walked straight into our samurai sword that something pressed deep in. Wooden floor with such power that no human can do, and completely silent. This happened twice. After the second time, my father took the sword and I did sleep with it, with one eye open for our safety, but we were all sleeping in my parents' room because of fears. Again, the footsteps started walking from second floor down to the room this time, where we all was then the footsteps stopped besides my parents' bed, and something tried to grab the sword from my dad's hands. My dad is over 100 kilo, so this spirit's force grabbed him and almost the sword away from bed. We was all shocked at this point, and I remember we was thinking how strong and how much capacity got this poltergeists. The entire family eye witnessed that. Then something did remove books from the bookshelf and troughed one of them straight on my dad's head. At this point, this house had become a nightmare horror movies. After this felt like comedy. For many weeks, there was strange sounds around the house for several months, so we started to get used to this, and then there could be months without anything. We also got a dog during our time in that house. Then it started again. Our dog once got angry, showed teeth to something we didn't see at the roof inside. Then the dog that is named Caxon got very scared sometimes, and Caxon was a smart, fast dog. But Caxon never went alone upstairs to the second floor where those steps started, and the place in-house that everything was at worst. Once my two younger brothers did run for their life downstairs crying because something moved around with them and replaced things close to them. When the poltergeists was most angry one Christmas, my dad noticed something that come downstairs. He grabbed a knife and started to run after something. First, I saw a very dark shadow floating upstairs, then my angry dad and tough dad running after it upstairs, and we heard a lot of noises and my dad screaming to something to get the hell out of our house. When he came back, he was pale, and we asked him what that ghost looked like, and he told he had never seen anything so ugly and pure evil. It was a male-looking ghost once. He tried to stab it. It gave him a very evil laugh and vanished into air. I never saw anything else than its shadow. One of my brothers saw a couple of spirits and something that was almost impossible to describe. One Christmas, when my grandma was there, she got so scared of these spirits, so she took taxi over 80-kilometer home. Our dog has still today very stressed nerves because of that house, and we moved away from that house many years ago, and I or my family have never after that experienced anything like that anywhere else. The house is nowadays empty. People moved in and very fast out. This was my true story, and after this experience, I think very different about paranormal. Almost 30 years ago now, I experienced something that to this day I cannot explain. It all started one summer night when my sister J, her boyfriend T, my boyfriend now, husband G, and I were sitting around talking about the paranormal. I was the only real paranormal buff. The others had little to no interest. I live in an urban area, but you don't have to drive too far to find yourself in the back of nowhere. There was a local legend about a spook light that appeared on some railroad tracks, where a country road crossed the tracks. It was said if you parked near the tracks and looked down them, you would see a bright light appear and move toward you with no sound. Well, we decided it would be fun to try and find the tracks and see if we could spot the spook light. So we all piled into T's car and took off. We were exploring the back roads trying to find the tracks and ended up turning down a narrow dirt road. This is where things got very weird. As we were driving slowly down the road, a large pickup truck suddenly appeared in front of us, barreling down the road at excessive speed. We narrowly avoided a head-on collision, T pulling sharply to the right to make room for the maniac driving that large truck. It was the kind with wooden slats on the sides of the truck bed, obviously a work truck of some kind. It looked older, perhaps from the 60s or 70s. After exclaiming over the recklessness of the driver, we continued down the road. However, now the whole atmosphere had changed. It felt weird and somehow off. We chalked it up to the near miss and continued down the road. It dead-ended at a county correctional facility. We were surprised and, quite frankly, nervous about being at a jail in the middle of the night. So we turned around and quickly made our way back up the dirt road. We ended back at the paved rural route we had turned off of to go down the dirt road. Across the route, and slightly offset to the left, was an entrance to another dirt road. There was a house on the corner with a porch light on that threw a dim light out. As T pulled the car out onto the paved route, the headlights swept across the entrance to that road and illuminated something laying in the middle of it a short way down. At first we thought it was a dead cow because it looked like it was black and white, so T turned around and pulled just into the entrance of the road so we could see what it was. We sat in stunned silence. Then my sister and I started screaming at T to back the car up and get the heck out of there. What we saw were two bodies laying one across the other in the road, as if they had fallen out of the back of a truck, like the one that nearly ran us off the road. They were young African-American men. They had on white t-shirts and jeans rolled up at the cuff, perhaps a jail uniform. The way they were sprawled, it was clear they were dead. Our first thought was that we had come across a murder scene, so we found the nearest payphone. Yes, this predated the advent of cell phones, and I called the police. After listening to my story, the dispatcher simply hung up on me. I was stunned. I went back to the car and told the others what happened. They were surprised, and best we could think was the dispatcher thought it was a prank. Or maybe they had heard the same story before. Either way, before we attempted to call again, we drove back to the spot to verify what we had seen. However, when we looked at the road, the bodies were gone. The porch light was now off at the house on the corner. And no, we were not in the wrong spot. The house was distinctive and the only one on that stretch of road. Plus, the dirt roads were the only ones between two larger, well-lit and named paved routes. After that, we went back home and sat around the table discussing what we had just experienced. It was strange, but I remember seeing a white dog walking down the road, oddly ignoring the bodies. Nobody else remembered seeing it. We came to the conclusion that the young men had been incarcerated in the jail and had somehow been killed. The jail was covering up the incident and attempting to dispose of the bodies. As I stated earlier, the truck was older, and the clothes the men were wearing looked to be from an older time period as well. It all seemed so out of place and just off. Fast forward to about 10 years later. My now husband and I decided to go back and see if we could find that road. We found the rural route and the dirt road that led to the jail, but there was no sign of the second dirt road and no evidence one had ever been there. There was no house either, just woods for at least a mile in either direction. So what did we see that night? Perhaps something called a place memory, where a traumatic event is somehow recorded in the very rocks and atmosphere, and in the right conditions, like an old movie it plays back. Or maybe we briefly slipped back in time and witnessed a horrific and tragic event. My husband is a very down-to-earth guy, but this affected him so badly he admitted to sleeping with the lights on for several nights after. We still discuss it to this day. It is one of the strangest things we have ever experienced. Tommy walked around Pogtopia looking for his brother. Brother? He asked, his voice echoing across the ravine he called home. A cold breeze brushed past his strawberry blonde hair, and he felt a shudder go down his spine. He shivers and puts up his blue cardigan and holds it tightly around his body. Tommy? Wilbur asks and walks out from one of the giant cracks that separated the rooms. His left hand was in his brown trench coat and his right holding a cigarette. Tommy sighs as he recalls the arguments he and his brother had over smoking. Still haven't stopped. No, Wilbur just scoffs and takes a drag and blows out that burned feeling he was addicted to. What do you want, Toms? Wilbur walks down the steps that seemed were just a step from crumbling into dust. Tubbo just came back with updates, Tommy said while fidgeting with Techno's friend Emerald. Wilbur's demeanor seems to light up at the mention of Tubbo and walks up to Tommy. Oh, is that so? What did he say? Tommy stayed quiet, resulting in Wilbur narrowing his eyes. He stepped forward, now staring down at Tommy. Answer me, he said with a tone colder than Snowchester. He said that there is going to be a festival in... Congratulations for the new L... Tommy gulps before continuing. The new... Le Manberg. It's apparently now Manberg. Tommy became quiet and uncomfortable while Wilbur's eyes widened and his rage ran through his veins like a washed-away wish running through an enraged river. What? Wilbur yells, and his voice echoes through the ravine, causing some birds a few miles away to fly. Tommy winces at the loud noise and takes a step back. Tommy's eyes start darting across the room, trying to figure out a way to calm him down. After a few moments of panicking, he grabs Wilbur's hands with hesitation. "Will, look at me," Tommy says with an audible edge in his voice. Wilbur looks down at Tommy with anger still swinging through his waves of blood. "We've already lost Le Manberg. Schlatt has taken over and we lost." Wilbur fell to his knees and started sobbing loudly. Tommy's eyes widened at Wilbur's sudden vulnerability. "My Le Manberg, Tom, my unfinished symphony, forever unfinished." He pauses and stands up, becoming quiet so quick that it scared Tommy a little. He looks out into the distance. If I can't have this, his eyes darken, then no one can. Later that night, Tommy was cooking the pork chops he found earlier and humming the Lemonberg anthem. Wilbur clears his throat, which startles Tommy, causing him to immediately get up quickly. He almost instantly realizes that there was someone behind his brother and tilts his head, which was a habit that grew on him from Fundy back at early. "Le Manberg, who's that?" Tommy asks with innocence and suspicion. "Who is he? Why is he here?" Wilbur doesn't lend his trust easily. Tommy was interrupted from his thoughts when the mysterious man chuckled. "Tommy, I know you don't like him, but I promise you, he's changed and will give guidance, not sorrow." Tommy's suspicion rises and rolls his eyes at Wilbur's poetry lines and his dramatic introduction to his friend. "Oh, Tommy," he started, and Tommy immediately recognized that voice and took out his sword and shudders due to the sudden headache he felt. "We're friends, aren't we?" Tommy felt a feeling of déjà vu, but shakes his head immediately to not show weakness. "No, we aren't. You're not manipulating me again, you big green bee. You put me through exile. Made my best friend exile me and killed me with a goddamn potato." Dream's eyes widen and takes a step back. "What?" Tommy gasps and quickly puts his hands over his mouth. "What the H-thrill was that?" Wilbur smirks at the reaction. "You know," he starts as he pushes himself off the wall. "You've always been so bad keeping your emotions to yourself." Wilbur almost whispers, but seems as loud as a yell. Tommy looks up at his brother, and he's now in a bloody yellow sweater with a giant blue cut in the middle, black jeans that seem to have distant bloodstains and dirt. His brown trench coat with the neck sides raised, too dark brown, almost black. Harnesses that seem to be holding his coat together. A half of his hair is shaved, and the other side is curly with a white streak. As Tommy looked up at his face, he noticed that Wilbur had green rotting skin on his right eye with seeming to be stitches holding those down. His eyes weren't his normal brownish red, but his right eye was deep blue and his left was dark, red alike with the blood that was carved out in the many wars Le Manberg experienced. Wilbur chuckles at his little brother's reaction, and he raises his eyebrow in a muse at Tommy's new look. Tommy tilts his head and looks down and dashes in front of the makeshift mirror he made out of scraps of glass he found around in the open. He was wearing his iconic red and white shirt, but seemed to have tears and cuts on the sleeves and bottom. His brown jeans were covers in dirt, blood cuts and dried mud. He also had a light blue cardigan with Le Manberg carved in the back. His jeans had 3 extra sets of pockets. He saw something moving in the back and saw an almost like devil tail, and notices the horns one of red, the other green, as if he always had a reminder that Dream was always watching on his side. He had a handmade set of gun pockets holding his sword, Melahi, and cat potions and maps. When he looked at his face, he saw bandages in all different colors. He had a blind eye and seemed to have little gold chains worn on his face as if it was a crown, just for him. "Wait, He whispers to himself and gasps. Why do I have Techno's trust? Emerald and his gold. Tommy's body starts trembling. His vision started getting blurry, and darkness started surrounding him until it closed up on him. He was now in a black void with no one but himself and more void. Hello? Tommy heard a young British boy yell. Shh, Toms. We don't want Wilby to find us. Another little British boy speaks while giggling. Oh, hush. Toms, it'll be fine. Plus we want those candies, right? Little Tommy smirks, and Tommy takes a step forward and watches the scene before him, like a movie theater, but he was the only one that grabbed a ticket. Little Tommy and Tubbo start to fade away, and Tommy tries to jump out to grab them, but falls deeper into the void. Tommy! Tommy recognized that voice from anywhere. He turns as quickly as humanly possible and sees little Jack and little Tommy. Tommy gasps as he looks around. In one, he sees Dream beating him with the potato, and he winces. Another he sees hugging Filza, and another he sees him and Wilbur making the name for Old Lemanberg. Tommy slowly walks up to it, as if one wrong step and all of this would crumble. We have to name this country Will. You know that, right? Past Tommy asks, Of course I do, bub. Tommy touches his heart as he hadn't heard that nickname in years. Oh, little Tommy jumps up. What? About Manberg? Yes, but that's too American. We don't like Americans. Do we, Tommy? Tommy gasps and sticks out his tongue. Ooh, never! Tommy put his hand under his chin as if to show he's thinking. Oh, what? About Lemanberg. Wilbur's gasps playfully. That's a wonderful name. Toms. They stand up and Wilbur ruffles Tommy's hair before leaving while little Tommy follows behind in admirement and excitement. Tommy's breathing hitches as he relives all of these memories surrounding him. Tommy! Tommy! He heard in an echo, and the darkness he found. Comforting arms wraps around him in a hug, and he jolts up awake in a cold sweat. What the F, Vic? He looked at his brother, and they weren't in Pogtopia. They were in the ruins of Lemanberg. Tommy bursted in a cry of pained memories and battle cries. The dark, cloudy setting starts to cry as if a reaction to Tommy's emotions. Wilbur looks at the rain and slowly puts his hand out as he feels rain for the first time in many years. Tom. Wilbur tried to reassure. It was the night terrors again, wasn't it? Wilbur asked, and just from the scene in front of him, he already knew his answer. Oh, bud. Wilbur wraps his arms around Tommy in a comforting embrace and hums the Lemanberg anthem. Minutes later, Tommy stops crying and nuzzles his head into his brother's chest. After the song ends, Wilbur can hear Tommy's soft snores as he sleeps. I just hope he doesn't get those night terrors again. The last time he had normal dreams was before exile. Just the thought of exile makes Wilbur instinctively touch his right eye. A ghost burr. He mumbles, and suddenly a blue ghost-like soul flies around him. Yes, revive burr. Ghost burr asks in his cheerful, childish tone, Has Tommy always had night terrors, or did it start after exile? Revive burr asks, while still looking at Tommy's sleeping body. Oh, Ghost burr seemed more sad. He didn't start with night terrors. It was after he took these pills and drinks. I saw one of the pill bottles and it said happy pills. I thought those were given by Nicky to help him through his pain. Revievber's eyes widen as he realizes his 16-year-old brother was taking Rugua and alcohol at such a young age. All right, you can go now. Oh, okay, bye, Reviveber. Ghostber smiles and flies around him and fades away. About an hour later, Tommy wakes up from his sleeping state and yawns while covering his mouth with the back of his palm. He looked up and saw Wilbur holding him and looking out into the distance. Will? Tommy asked while still having a sleepy tone. Wilbur looked down at Tommy and smiled with reassurance. Yes, Tommy? Wilbur responded, and Tommy became on edge with Wilbur's lack of irritation and became a little worried. Is everything all right? Of course, Tom. Why wouldn't it be? It's just that you seem nicer and more affectionate, and I feel like you're hiding something from me. Oh, Tommy, I don't want you worrying about me. I'm all right. I've just noticed your lack of your normal childish demeanor, and I want to make you feel better, nothing more." Tommy mumbled something about trust and crossed his arms before looking away. Wilbur chuckled in amusement at his brother's response, which only irritated Tommy more. "What are you laughing at?" Tommy shouted, but in Wilbur's eyes he saw little Tommy pouting and yelling about doing a treasure hunt, which is how he found Malohi and "Get my ewe," which resulted in a snickering Wilbur. "Oh my XD," Tommy stood up and stomped away. He didn't exactly have a destination, but it resulted in him in front of his old house. He stood in front of it and took in a deep breath, smelling all the memories he experienced. He walks inside, while smiling a little to himself, and hears hissing and cracks. Tommy tilted his head and looked up. He gasps, "Shroud!" He shouted and quickly ran to his chests, finding a lever and smashing the glass cage he put around it, and holding Shroud to him close, as if he'd turned to dust if he had let go. Shroud grumbles in annoyance and happiness. "Oh, Shroud, I missed you so much. I'm so sorry for leaving you behind." Tommy yells before picking him up and searching through his chests with one hand, while the other is holding Shroud. "You want to listen to blocks, Shroud?" Tommy asks with a smile full of pride in his eyes. Shroud nods and Tommy walks over to the bench and holds Shroud as he puts the music disc. If any of these stories felt too real, that's because one of them was never meant to be shared. Some experiences don't end when the story ends. They wait until someone listens. If you heard something that followed you into the dark, don't look for it. Just remember, it knows you listened.